Hannah Salem, aka Mary. I'm a Lebanese, Aboriginal, bisexual woman.
Hello, I'm Durian Haq, aka Daya. I'm an Indonesian Pakistani non-binary lesbian.
We are two writers who love movies, television, and books, especially when they're gay.
And welcome to Gay V Club, where we'll be analysing LGBT texts
that we like, that we don't like, and how we relate to these texts as gay people of colour. We are doing the first of our Shakesqueer series today, and we thought we'd start off. I think this is a very accessible play to start off with. If you don't like Shakespeare, you can watch this and still enjoy it. We are looking at Much Ado About Nothing.
The reason that we wanted to do this series is because,
this
series of episodes,
is because Shakespeare couldn't write a straight character to save his life.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about compulsory heterosexuality and queer subtext in Much Ado About Nothing, which is a comedy by Shakespeare from the late 16th century where two dumbass bisexuals named Beatrice and Benedict are tricked into realising they're in love with each other.
My OTP forever. So today we're going to be talking about bisexuality. You know, there's always bisexuality in Shakespeare because he was a bisexual menace, some might say.
So just general queer subtext in this play.
But also looking at a bit of misogyny and looking at how all these themes are looked at or not looked at in adaptations.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, there aren't as many adaptations of this play as you'd think.
No, not like screen adaptations, I mean.
No. It's performed a lot. It's not got as many adaptations as, say, Romeo and Juliet or even
Hamlet.
My
boy.
Your boy. But we are going to be focusing around the theme of compulsory heterosexuality. Daya, if you would like to start us off with the definition of comphet, that would be lovely.
So compulsory heterosexuality is the idea that heterosexuality is assumed and enforced by a patriarchal and heteronormative society. It was popularized in 1980 by lesbian activist, poet and essayist Adrienne Rich. These days, it is used quite casually as kind of like a synonym for heteronormativity. And I'm definitely guilty of this. I know on this podcast, I've used the phrase comphet to describe any kind of knee-jerk impulses of attraction or other heteronormative behaviors like instilled within us. But it's really not.
But it's actually like, it's very much the societal level of like how nearly everything in society works to make you adhere to.
I think like in the past few years, people have started kind of using it to describe on a personal level. This episode, we're going to talk about mostly the macro level.
It was actually designed as a more institutionalized like term, I believe, in order to talk about how everything around you conspires
as an institutional phenomenon.
Yeah, to make you believe and adhere to a heterosexual paradigm. You feel that pressure, and even people who I've spoken to people who have been very comfortable in their identity, like LGBT identity, for a very long time, but still experience feelings of guilt.
There are many factors to comphet, such as evolutionary theory and religion, but today we want to focus on the big one, which is manifestations of male power. There was an anthropologist named Kathleen Goff, and she said that male power is characterized mostly by rejecting women's sexuality, forcing male sexuality on women, exploiting women's labor, objectification, and just general, like, denying women of any creativity, education, knowledge, or the opportunity to have it, like, any kind of cultural achievements. Yeah, so we think Much Ado is excellent because it demonstrates a very clear understanding of this through its exploration of gender roles, but we also think that you can gain a lot more understanding, I think, of the play when you consider the possibility that certain characters are queer.
And that's why they're so against actually getting married. I think a lot of adaptations do look at this, whether they do it intentionally or unintentionally, because obviously I think this is a part of the play. Even if Shakespeare...
It's an intrinsic part of the play, you can't separate it.
Yeah, even if Shakespeare didn't have the vocab.
Some people do manage to, but I'll get to it.
But yeah, we will be looking at all these different adaptations, but the main ones we'll be looking at are Kenneth Branagh's, is it
1993?
Yep.
Version of Much Ado, starring he himself, of course, Emma Thompson,
Keanu Reeves,
and Denzel. Denzel, he looks so good in that movie.
He does. I'm not a Denzel person, but that film, I'm like, I see it. I know what people mean.
His eyes are so sparkly.
I know.
Yeah.
He's just glowing.
Yeah.
They're all glowing.
The comphet jumps out of me.
And then the other version we'll be talking about is the 2011... It's
a production by Josie Rourke.
It's a staged production, and it stars Catherine Tate as Beatrice and David Tennant as Benedict. I was going to briefly talk about the Joss Whedon version
2012.
from 2012, but I have since decided to not do that because I don't think he does anything interesting. The other version we'll be looking at, it's actually become like in my top 3 versions of Much Ado, the 2019 Central Park performance of Much Ado that featured an all-black American cast and starred Daniel Brooks as Beatrice and Grantham Coleman as Benedict, and they're just so funny. Like, yes. They are hilarious. So yeah, they're the 3 main versions. So the 1993
93, 2011,
and I will also briefly mention a stage performance I saw in Sydney last year because there's just something I want to bring up. But I just generally talk about it because obviously no one can go and watch that.
Another reason that I wanted to do Shakesqueer is even though film and TV and books are a lot more accessible, a lot of LGBT stories do thrive and begin in the theatre.
And theatre culture is inherently gay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if you ever do get the opportunity to go see Much Ado, go do it because it's a great play.
It's actually just funny, and even if you don't see any of the subtext, like it's still just
maybe you will see it after we've spoken
maybe you
about
will see it, but even if you don't, like it's just a really fun. Like this was one of the first Shakespeare plays I saw that I really actually enjoyed. I think it's really good in that way because it is so accessible, because it is quite a simple story. Like, I believe this play became the basis of a lot of, like, rom-coms and things.
The original rom-com.
Is the OG. Let's start off with our first bisexual disaster.
I wouldn't call her a disaster, though. I'd say she's very functional.
She's actually, she's a high-functioning bisexual.
The functional bisexual, Beatrice.
That's going to be the name of my autobiography. The functional bisexual.
You think you're functional? Please.
Oh, ouch. Ouch. So Beatrice is, would you call her the heroine?
I would call her the heroine.
She is the heroine or main female lead, I guess you could say, of Much Ado. She very much rails against the whole idea of marriage, of men in general.
Yeah.
One of, like, her key rants is when she goes on about how she finds no men appealing whatsoever. So many lines, like, I had rather hear my dog bark at a crow than a man swear he loves me. And it's really more the idea of a man loving her that she, like, completely just finds disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's
mostly because she kind of just thinks it's impossible. She doesn't believe in romance with men because what's romantic about being oppressed by male power?
No.
And she's definitely surrounded with this. Like, she lives with her cousin Hero and her uncle Leonardo. The way that Leonardo enforces compet on Hero is...
It would be hard to grow up around hearing how she must get married and how she must do this.
So at the beginning of the play, Hero, she gets a little bit smitten, apparently, with Claudio.
Why would you?
One of the soldiers. And her father tells her, daughter, remember what I told you. If the prince do solicit you in that kind, you know your answer. As in, you know you're supposed to say yes, you're supposed to perform this role. Beatrice rails against that. She's very much like, but do you like him? And yeah, that's when she has her other pretty fun monologue about how she'll probably die an old maid.
That iconic where she's like, and then I'll go to hell with all the other bachelors and we'll just sit and be merry because...
No, I'll go to hell first and then be cast out by the devil. And then I'll go to heaven and sit with all the bachelors and be merry there.
And be merry there. So she's very much not into the whole idea of marriage at all, or like even just courting men. It's not on her radar at all.
Yeah.
Even though there are all these men around, not just propositioned by Benedict in this story.
She has all the options.
She has all the options. She is initially propositioned by Don Pedro.
Who is the prince.
He is, arguably, he's the catch.
Yeah. Don Pedro is my favourite bisexual in this whole story, by the way. But we'll get to that.
I feel like he genuinely loves, like, Beatrice. He genuinely thinks she's cool. He's like, yeah, I'd love to, like, marry this gal.
Unfortunately, her one lapse of judgment is liking Benedict.
Unfortunately, yes.
Who coincidentally is also my ex. I'll get into that later.
Your ex?
No, like I was just speaking now from Don Pedro's perspective.
Right. Yes. So Beatrice, very much against marriage, very much against men. One of my other favourite rants is how she goes on about like the qualities she would find like good in a man, and basically like when she lists them out, she's like, yeah, like he who has a beard is too much of a man or something like that. And he who doesn't have a beard, like, is a youth and not for me. So essentially, no one. Like,
no one.
Like, no one.
Like, she kind of lists, like, these crazy conditions. She's just like, only under these circumstances would I be in love with a man.
Which is very, very It's a very common thing that a lot of people, like friends of mine who are lesbians and also like friends of mine who are bi, have described like, oh, I would only be with a man if they come up with this criteria because it's much easier to be like, oh, well, no one meets my criteria and that's why I'm not with anyone. It's better to be like, oh, I'm bad at heterosexuality than to say that I'm not heterosexual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, that's what Beatrice's speech comes off at. It's like, it's much easier for her to be like, oh, well, I just don't like anyone than it is to actually be like, I'd rather be like with a woman or whatever.
And lesbian erasure is a big part of
yes.
compulsory heterosexuality.
Yes.
So,
and isn't there that line where she says, only if the man, like, dressed up as a woman, like, would I actually be with a man?
No, it's not similar to that. She's like, what would I do with a man? Like, if I had a man, I would, like, dress him as a woman. So, yeah. Gender. I love Beatrice. Like, she's so fiery. She's got the pottiest mouth.
Oh my god, yeah. She's the most forward, I think.
Of all of Shakespeare's female characters in the comedies. Yeah, she's just so smart and witty and, like, God, I wish that were me.
I often feel like Much Ado is a nicer version of Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah.
Like, it's a much nicer version where the women do have more agency.
Yeah.
Like, when you read Taming of the Shrew, I think it's actually quite horrible what happens with those women and how the men manipulate them. But I like it in this story because I feel like Shakespeare, like, had a bit of a change of heart and was like, I could do this without the men being horrible and manipulating women. Instead, I'll, like, play tricks on the men too, so it's at least even in that regard. There's a lot of similarities for me, like, between Beatrice and, like, Katerina in Taming of the Shrew.
I also feel like Beatrice is the blueprint for Lizzie Bennet from Pride and Prejudice.
Yes.
We're big Pride and Prejudice fans.
We're big Pride and Prejudice
we believe
fans.
that Jane Austen was a big Much Ado fan.
But more importantly, not only do we believe it, but Miss Virginia Woolf herself believes it, and describes Austen in her essay, which if you haven't read this essay and you're a woman in literature, I highly recommend you read A Room of One's Own because it is like essentially Virginia Woolf's treatment on, like, quote-unquote female literature. And she describes Jane Austen as essentially, like, the female Shakespeare. And one of the reasons she believes this is because there are so many Shakespearean beats in Jane Austen's work. And one of those major things is that you can very much see Beatrice and Benedict in Darcy and Lizzie. Like, I feel like Pride and Prejudice is just Much Ado, but without all the tricking. Two people coming to realise, oh, maybe you're not so bad, without being tricked into it. What we're trying to say is you can see these characters in a lot of places if you look, and I think that's why it's relevant to look at Shakespeare, because his characters and what he created has been appropriated quite a lot. But one thing that Beatrice does that I love is that she frequently slut-shames Benedict.
Yes.
Because he is a bisexual disaster, where she is a functioning bisexual.
I feel like the more obvious case of compulsory heterosexuality is, of course, the oppression of women in this play, but it does affect men too. And we do see this with Benedict and with Don John.
They are both mocked extensively for being bachelors. That is their goal, kind of thing. Like, other than being soldiers and fighting in wars, like, their other goal is to become part of this patriarchal system where they have wives and uphold this system. And Benedict, much like Beatrice, doesn't really want to be a part of that very much. Like, he doesn't have any interest in it. He sees no point in it. He'd rather die a bachelor than live as a married man. The sad thing is, I do feel like even though, like, Beatrice and Benedict, what they are saying is quite revolutionary, quote-unquote, in one way you read it, it's worth acknowledging that because it's a comedy and because of the time it's written, I feel like it's more, we're meant to laugh at them for thinking that kind of thing, which is kind of sad, but I think you can't joke about something without it being slightly serious. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's always a slice of truth. But yeah, Benedict is, and I think he's bi. And the reason he rails against the system is because he's like, I don't see why I gotta do this.
He hath every month a new sworn brother. You know, it's a bad stereotype that bisexual people are sluts, but
But sometimes bisexuals are sluts.
And sometimes that bisexual is Benedict from
Yeah.
Much Ado About Nothing.
And
In
Benedict...
fact, possibly the first time a bisexual was a slut in a piece of media.
was Benedict.
Quite possibly.
You know, in the first scene that we haven't even met Benedict yet.
We haven't even met Benedict, but Beatrice, she paints like quite a
slutty picture of him. And this is why I believe that David Tennant played him in the 2011 version. But yes, Beatrice says,
"Oh, he's a good soldier to a lady. What is he to a lord?"
So indeed, he is no less than a stuffed man. But for the stuffing, well, we are all mortal.
Who is his companion now? He hath every month a new sworn brother. Is there no young squarer now that will take a voyage with him to the devil? I love Danielle Brooks' delivery of that one.
Danielle Brooks does this monologue like better than most Beatrices, I think. Like she, like I don't know why, but she was born to do this monologue.
And,
she is excellent.
And of course, none but libertines delight in him.
Ooh, yeah. Call out post.
Yeah, but I love that they're just... that Beatrice and Benedict, you know, despite this, they are obsessed with each other
They
very
really
clearly.
Are. And it's actually quite funny because before this, it's implied that they've never met.
It's implied that they've never met. Like, I remember in this very scene, Leonardo talks like they never meet, but there's
there's a merry war betwixt them.
There's a merry war betwixt them. People act as if they've never met, but also like they very clearly have, and they very clearly have a reputation for the banter.
And we are given this piece of, like, we're given this little nugget of a line. I think it actually describes most of what D ships. Like, it's the nugget of...
It's the bare essential
of most things that...
Of my ideal relationship dynamic in fiction.
Which is after they've had their first sort of, like, back and forth banter, he sort of basically cops out and is like...
And uses like a cheap...
Yeah, uses like...
Makes like a cheap joke.
Makes a very cheap joke. And she's like, oh, you always...
End with a Jade's trick.
End with a Jade's trick.
I know you of old. Were they, you know, did they know each other of old?
I think they did know each other of old. I think people think they haven't met, but I think they have met.
They very clearly have. I love that. I love that
Lot.
dynamic.
It's a lot to
You may remember from our Handmaiden episode, Mary asked me why I love it, and I said, I don't like romance. And that was like actually the first time I'd said anything like that, and I was surprised at myself. Yeah, we managed to hit the nail on the head a bit later, and realizing that I don't really like romance. I like the knowing. I like the intimacy of knowing and how that can manifest in things more interesting than romance.
Yes.
But sometimes it does manifest in romance, which I quite like anyway. But, you know, there needs to be that better element to it.
I do agree. One of the other reasons you love this ship is because it's antagonistic, and that's your other thing. D loves, like, you know, some people are like enemies to lovers. You're like, why can't they be enemies and lovers?
Yes. Just to be clear, not in like a Raylo sort of way.
Oh,
like with Raylo, there is no knowing. There's no understanding.
They
there
don't
is
know
none
each
of that
other.
shit.
They met like for like 10 minutes ago.
And also like they can't be like total like polar opposites.
No.
They just need to be very similar people, but on different sides of things.
Yes. More like antagonists, not enemies.
Yes.
Like, you can antagonize someone without them being your enemy. But yeah, so we've got Beatrice and Benedict. They are our mains. They are both bisexual. They both know each other quite intimately through this banter and through whatever we have not seen and do not get.
He lent his heart to me a while.
Ooh, shit.
Yes.
Yeah, there's another line later on where Beatrice says, "Indeed, my lord, he lent it me a while, and I gave him use for it, a double heart for his single one." Yeah. I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of indication that they were together at some point, very briefly, but then couldn't get their heads out their asses long enough to actually to stay together.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were just too immature, which is a big call to make, because I feel like these characters are very immature anyway.
Yes.
But maybe the implication is that they were, like, when they were much younger, they were together for a while, but they were too young. And then now they're coming together as mature, adults. But Beatrice and Benedict are not the only bisexuals.
Yes,
as
I said, Don Pedro is my favourite bisexual in this story. He's my boy.
He's played by Denzel Washington in the 93
yes.
version, and I'm pretty sure Denzel's version of Don Pedro is the best.
I really like him in that. He's very flirty with both Benedict and Beatrice. I love him more in that kind of like he's... Even though he is made lonely by Beatrice and Benedict, who he's lost, he still strives for their happiness.
The worst thing ever when your two crushes get married to each other. It's like, ouch. Big ouch.
There is a lot of queer subtext in the 93 version by Kenneth Branagh. I do want to preface this by saying I despise Kenneth Branagh. When I see him, it's on sight. I'm very disappointed that we as a society somehow allowed Kenneth Branagh to have the monopoly on Shakespeare adaptations. Like, I hate that, like, most of the very recent popular adaptations are his.
And now he's also trying to get a monopoly on Agatha Christie, which I personally hate because I love Agatha Christie, but I hate him.
It's like he wants to be Agatha Christie, he wants to be Shakespeare, and he wants to be Laurence Olivier.
But I don't think he's good at any of these things. Do you know what I mean? Like, just because you want to be something doesn't mean you're good at it.
So in general, I don't really like Kenneth Branagh's movies. I don't really like Much Ado. I don't really like his Much Ado, but I'll get into that. Yeah, mostly I just really dislike that people, like, outside of academia and outside of the theatre, like, if they do want to get kind of a bearing of, you know, what Shakespeare's plays are like, they're going to watch his movies. And I hate that they're going to look at his interpretations and think that's not the fault of the audience. Like, it's much more accessible. It's so much easier to just watch a movie. But I hate that he's not the only one, but he's kind of the only...
Also,
all of his ones are very popularized as opposed to other people's.
He casts himself as the most interesting characters in most of his... But he doesn't have the charisma nor gravitas to play any of the characters he cast himself as. Like, he cast himself to play as Iago in Othello, and I'm like, you really think you have the gravitas to play the most petty bitch in any, like, Shakespeare play? Like, you really think you've got that? Like, no. And then
he cast himself as William Shakespeare in a biopic about Shakespeare that he wrote and directed himself as well.
And he cast himself as Benedict in his own version of Much Ado, as if he has the charisma to do that.
Also, you know what? I will get into it now. He cast himself as Benedict. He cast his then wife, Emma Thompson, as Beatrice, who he cheated on.
He cheated on her, right? Do you know how painful it is for me to... I can't actually watch this
Which
movie.
is why I feel like the 93 version, like, while I think it has, like, some fun characterization of other characters, but yeah, the film's exploration of misogyny and compulsory heterosexuality, like, it's not criticized to the point where it should be. I don't think we can expect that from the guy that cheated on Emma Thompson, but yeah.
Can you imagine cheating on Emma Thompson? No, I can't, because even as a hypothetical, it sounds stupid.
But yeah, anyway, something that his version does, there is quite a bit of queer coding in his version of Much Ado About Nothing.
But it's more queer coding in the sense that they just hate women.
Yeah, it's more queer coding in the sense that they hate women and also that they're homophobic. You can see this in the costuming. My favourite shot is of when the prince and his men all assemble at the house for the first time, and you can see, even though they're wearing, like, the same white jackets together, they've got different pants on. So I feel like Don Pedro is, like, squarely in the middle, and he's wearing blue leather pants. To one side, he's got Benedict and Claudio and that other guy, and they're wearing blue pants, but they're like... And then on the other side, you have Keanu and his posse. Keanu, played by Don John, and his posse.
Don John, played by Keanu.
Yeah, sorry, Don John, played by Keanu and his etc. He's wearing black leather pants, and it's like... That's why I refer to this as the Kinsey scale shot, because just of the fabrics used, and, you know, leather, you know, is often subtextually used to imply homoeroticism, thanks to icon Tom of Finland. Yeah, I like that Don Pedro was, like, right in the middle wearing the blue leather to say that he's
smack bang in the middle.
He's smack bang in the middle of the Kinsey scale. Okay,
I do want to say, with costuming, actually, and how this plays around with gender roles.
Yes.
My favourite version of the party scene of it is in the 2011 version, where Beatrice and Benedict are actually in drags in like drag. So David Tennant as Benedict is dressed in like a miniskirt for the party and like fishnet stockings and like, I don't know what you call it.
He's got a wig and a pig snout.
A wig and a pig snout and sequined top and like boots, whatever. And then Catherine...
He's got some kinky boots on.
And then the Catherine Tate as Beatrice is wearing a suit.
Yes.
With some sunglasses for the party. I don't know, I wish more versions like played with...
decision most pleasing to me. She does sit like that.
Yes, she sits like that for like a lot of her monologue scene, and it's like, how are we meant to think that she is straight in this scene when she's going on about how much she hates men while dressed like this, while sitting like this?
While sitting with like her leg like rested up on the arm of the armchair. I just love the idea of a butch Beatrice.
Yes.
Yes.
She is very butch, though.
She is, though.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of the adaptations of this play around with gender like as much. Adaptations of this play around as much with gender as they should, considering what the content of the play is. But I really like that version like very much does in the costuming. When you research queer subtext for this play or any kind of homoerotic subtext for this play, the thing that comes up over and over again, the thing that people tend to fixate on is Don John, the very quote-unquote plain villain. He basically is the one that wants to put a stop to all this heterosexual nonsense going on around him. And the reason people think that he wants to do that is because he's gay, because we never really get a clear motivation as to why he wants to do any of this anyway. He seems to be on good terms with pretty much everybody. No one seems to treat him any
People are
differently.
quite nice to him, but he's just nice. Like, I am but a plain dealing villain. Why? Because I just am.
Yeah.
Like, he's contrary for the sake of being contrary. He's all like, let me be that I am and seek not to alter me, but dude,
what's wrong? Like,
what's your motivation? And he's just like, because I'm gay.
Yeah. A lot of people think that is the subtext.
Yeah, a lot of people think that is the subtext. The way a lot of adaptations and performances of the first scene of Don John with his boys, like the way that they deal with it a lot, they contain a lot of homoerotic undertones and are often interrupted by news of heterosexuality. For instance, in the 93 Kenneth Branagh version, you have Keanu Reeves looking the best that he's ever looked.
Truly.
Unfortunately, looking the best that he's ever looked.
He looks so good.
Yeah, he's got his shirt off. He's being massaged by Conrad. I don't know. There's a weird moment where like he's monologuing but also touching his face, and it's very like, fellas,
is it gay to monologue about how much you're a villain and touch a man's face, you know? Is it?
But then Baraccio comes in and is like, yo, Claudio likes this chick. And the way that it's framed, it's like Don John and Conrad in this private room of them being quite homoerotic together. It's been interrupted.
Pillow talk plans.
It's been interrupted. This kind of like utopia that he has just with his boys has been interrupted, and that's the way that a lot of productions play that scene, as kind of a way to suggest Don John's motivations, often in a very homophobic way, I think. You kind of do see this mirrored with Benedict and the way that he talks about how much he doesn't want to be married. He just wants to be with his boys too.
Like, there's an implication that, you know, Benedict could be like Don John.
Yeah.
But he's not, because somewhere deep down he does care for Beatrice.
Yeah.
And just needs a little bit of a push to not be a shit.
Yeah. I don't really think it is fair to call Don John a villain, mostly because he doesn't really do anything. It's Baraccio that actually comes up with all the evil plans, and he's kind of just like, only to despite them, I will endeavor anything. So it feels like he's kind of just spiteful for the sake of being spiteful. He was probably the first person to say, "Move, I'm gay." He's just very petty and very unhappy with this heterosexuality around him, and he tries to stop it.
I would also make an argument for like internalized homophobia, and he's just mad at how like
quite possibly
he's aware of his own quote unquote failure as a man. And wants to just ruin everyone else's lives because he knows he can't change himself, so he can just make everyone else as unhappy as he is, which is quite possible. I don't know. Yeah. There's no way of knowing if that's what Shakespeare intended or if that's what it really is, but it is still, I think it's still worth acknowledging that it's a very common, interpretation of it. I don't think in the 2011 version it's implied that much. He's actually quite...
I think it's a little bit there.
I don't know.
You still read it that way?
I personally don't see it in that version. I actually just think they played up the plain part of him being a plain villain because he's so boring in that.
Yeah.
Literally, whenever I rewatch it, I fast forward his scenes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Another thing, because like Don John, as I said, he's not really the mastermind of any of these evil plans, but he wants to go through with them anyway. And I think, and the thing is, like, his so-called evil plans are kind of just like often small lies to people, getting everyone to erupt like that. And I think because that highlights that this play is very much about misogyny, the structure of misogyny, like in the patriarchy, because all Don John needs to do is just tell like a small lie, and suddenly Claudio, who is apparently, who thinks that he's in love with Hero, will immediately be like jump at her throat. Like Don John plays on the fact that people hate her. That no one will believe her, and that people hate women anyway.
There's already a distrust of women that exists enough that all he has to do is vaguely imply that Hero is unfaithful. Yeah. I do think as well, like, this is another thing that, like, speaks the bisexual virtues, if you like, of Beatrice and Benedict, is that they don't believe it. Even Benedict, like, when he hears of this, he's like, what the? No? He's like, with no motivation, really, to do it. He's just sort of like, that doesn't sound right. Whereas everyone else is like, oh, it must be true. I saw it in the window, so it must be true. So yeah, and it is quite sad actually how they treat Hero as a result. They actually plan to humiliate her, and that's almost a completely accepted thing. Her father even sort of half participates in it because he just believes them as well. And I think it also speaks to like the precarious position that women, even when you are, like, in line to be married and are desirable in that way, like, how precarious it actually is.
Yeah, and, like, kind of just also, like, what women are expected to be and the way that Hero is expected to be a maid, and, like, the offences caused by the possibility of Hero not being, like, an untouched version when she marries Claudio.
But Shakespeare was looking to expose, like, how horrible that is, and things are set right by the end, but the middle is quite intense.
Do you wanna talk about, like, the post failed wedding scene?
Yeah.
So I didn't write this, but I thought I should mention it. I feel the real turning point of this play is after the non-wedding, after Claudio humiliates Hero. And casts her away.
She Gone Girls him.
What?
She Gone Girls
him.
Yeah,
Hero does Gone Girl.
This is the original Gone Girl, guys. Beatrice and Benedict, they're both feeling pretty vulnerable. Beatrice has just seen her lovely cousin, who she loves very much, humiliated in front of all these stupid men that have come to her house. So at this point in the play, Beatrice and Benedict both believe that the other is in love with them, but doesn't want to say anything. They are tricked into believing this. Neither of them have actually said anything of the sort, but they are tricked into it because their friends basically have fake conversations about how
Don Pedro hatches this genius plan. See, I love my boy. Yeah. Like,
he just wants his crushes to have, like, a good life.
He just wants the loves of his lives to be happy.
Yeah.
Even if that means without him. I don't think they can't be without him. You know, we don't know. We don't know.
Thruples are valid. We don't know. But anyway, they're both feeling pretty vulnerable. So Beatrice is, like, crying. She's not having a good time. And Benedict, because he's an absolute disaster, chooses this moment to be like, I do so love nothing in the world so much as you. It is, guys, this is the most tenderest, like, confession of love. And I don't think it matters what version you're watching. This is always, like, so cute. This is always, like, just, wow. But I think we can both agree that, like, the biggest energy, like, for this scene is in the 2011 version.
Yes.
With David Tennant and Catherine Tate. David Tennant is so awkward and he just, like, shouts it, and then she just sort of, Catherine Tate as Beatrice is just like, what? And he's like, it's not that strange.
And she, like, screams and runs away from him because she's just like, I cannot believe you. I cannot believe you would confess to me at a time like this. Yes. What kind of animal?
What kind of idiot would do that? I mean, I can't believe you would do that. And then after she's basically roasted him for doing that, she just goes, so I guess I should say that I do so love nothing in the world so much as you. And then they're both, because they're both such dorks, are like, they're like squealing and running around and they're very happy. I feel like this is one of my favourite love confession scenes because
very much.
It's like so simple.
Yes.
And it's like, it's what goes unsaid. Because actually it's quite funny because at this point they actually haven't said anything. Neither of them have said anything. They just think the other has said these things. So for it to just all of it come out in just such a simple, lovely line, I do so love nothing in the world so much as you, is just like so lovely. But what happens after? It's like one of my favourite things.
My favourite 0 to 100 moments.
0 to 100.
Where Beatrice is like, oh, so if you do love me, can you kill your best friend, please, for wronging my cousin?
Yeah, can you kill Claudio? And
prove to me it's real.
Yeah, and Benedict is sort of like, are you sure? Like,
I don't quite want to do that.
You know, I mean, he was probably his ex-boyfriend at some point. Who knows?
Yeah.
Most probably. He's just like, I would rather not. But at first, he's quite reluctant. At first, he's like, oh, I'd rather not. But then Beatrice is like, well, then you don't love me. And he's like, okay.
Okay.
All right. There's no need to go that far. All the scenes that follow that are Beatrice and Benedict, like, being absolutely tender as hell and, like, just being just so lovely. I don't know. It's not that hard to play Beatrice and Benedict, like, well, I think most versions, like, I've seen just do a really good job and the actors do a really good job. However, I just want to say, one of my favourite tropes of all time, I love a good forehead touch. I do. And when I went to see Much Ado, there was a version of Much Ado that was on in Sydney. I was very excited. I was like, I have to go, because I've never actually seen this play live. I love it, but I've never actually seen it live.
I haven't yet.
You will one day. Next time it's on anywhere, we'll go. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go. So I went with my cousin, and we went together. And also, I was low key very angry because after intermission, like, a lot of people didn't come back, and I was like, the tastelessness. But anyway, during the scene that is after this between Beatrice and Benedict, where basically she comes to see him to be like, have you killed Claudia yet? And he's like, no, we have exchanged some strong words though. It's one of my favourite lines where, you know, Beatrice is basically being like, oh, I'm so depressed right now because my cousin is like, you know, it's meant to be dead and I'm meant to be sad, but I'm also happy because I'm kind of with you, but I shouldn't be happy because I'm sad and that's making me sad and blah, blah, blah. And he just sort of has like he says, serve God, love me and mend. And I, like, die every time I hear this line because I just think it's so tender and lovely. But when I was watching this particular play, they are, like, touching foreheads when they say this. And I was literally
That is your shit.
I was literally like, oh my God. They just love each other so much. You know how you were saying before, like, straw that broke the camel's back? It's kind of like all they needed was someone to be like, actually, the reason you'll fight is because you like each other. And they were like, what? True.
Sounds kind of fake, but actually it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I just think it's really lovely. But that love confession scene, every version of it is fantastic. The only version that I hate it is just in the 93 version, but that's because I'm like, I can't believe.
Fuck you, Kenneth Branagh.
You say
Fuck
this.
you.
I say this. You say this, Kenneth, but we know that you don't. It is my favourite scenes. And quite often when I need a serotonin boost for whatever reason, I will just go and watch Beatrice and Benedict scenes. But you have, I think, a much more... You think Hero is a lesbian.
Oh, yeah.
Which I is not an interpretation I've actually heard from you. Not really.
No, not really. That was kind of just spur of the moment. It was like, why not? But actually, like, it does make a lot of sense.
Please speak to the Hero is a lesbian.
In like an ideal version of Much Ado About Nothing, like, you know, obviously, you know, Benedict and Beatrice, like, they set everyone right. Claudius, you know, begs forgiveness. No, Claudio, sorry. Claudio, not Claudius. That's a whole other bitch. The best villain. No, he's not.
That's only because I'm a Scar apologist. So.
Yeah, that's true. Claudio, after being gone girled by Hero, expresses remorse. He's just like, oh, no, I should have, you know, actually asked what her side of the story was. I should have actually, had, some basic communication skills.
Also basic
I should have
empathy for people.
I shouldn't have, taken the word of this guy who's always frowning all the time and and is mean to everyone for no reason. I hate Claudio so much. It's unreal. And, it's surprised, woo, Hero's still alive. The only reason that I like this scene of Hero and Claudio's wedding is because it's the scene where Benedict and Beatrice get exposed as the fools in love that they are. But, I would just like to say that Hero was a lesbian, and, her flirtation with, Claudio's, the first guy that's guy her age who's really come into her life, given her some attention, and, she's smitten at first, and then, they decide to marry quite quickly, and, obviously she has this pressure from her father to become Claudio's bride. So I just think, Hero's, a good example of just a victim of compulsory heterosexuality, because she's with this man who was very ready to just kill her. Pretty honestly,
much. And he is violent with her.
Yes, he is quite violent, and in a lot of productions of it, he is quite violent to her, and it's kind of he realized the errors of his ways. He's okay. If I were to adapt Much Ado, I would change the ending where Hero doesn't accept Claudio's apology because he was nothing but horrible to her. Let her be a lesbian just for fun.
Is it a bad time to tell you that production I saw in Sydney actually did do that?
What? And I missed it?
Yeah.
No!
They play that scene exactly the same, except they don't get married, and she's just like, no, I'm not going to marry you. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I am Boo Boo the Fool.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I actually was so shocked watching. I was like, whoa, the drama. I was like, this is so much.
Whenever I watch any version of Much Ado, that's, as much as I love Beatrice and Benedict, I'm still very, scared for Hero at the end of it.
Yeah.
And, oh man, I should have gone to see that.
And this is also, I think...
I was poor.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Next time. But also I think it's worth mentioning as well, with the Pride and Prejudice connection. I do feel when Jane Austen, let's imagine Miss Austen sitting reading Much Ado. Yeah. She was like, I don't see any reason why this poor hero girl has to go through this. I'm just gonna, she can just have I'm gonna call her Jane.
Because everyone loves her.
Because everyone loves her, and she's going to have a wonderful life. And she's just going to have a nice romance with a nice man who is going to just think that she's great. I really appreciate Miss Austen for just being like, this play is nice. I'm just going to take all the...
I have some notes.
Mr. Spear. But yeah, I really do believe that Pride and Prejudice is just Much Ado without all the horribleness and the lying.
Without too much deceit. No,
yeah.
Actually, most of the deceit is quite the only deceit.
But also where the deceit is it's mostly actually just not deceit. It's just you never asked. It's literally if you had asked, I would have told you.
Pride and Prejudice is Much Ado if Don John was straight. And a menace. And if Don John was a heterosexual menace.
Yes, essentially. If I were to make my own version of Much Ado, I think also taking the hero Claudio thing out also elevates Benedict and Beatrice to the main romance, which is what they should be anyway. I mean, most people interpret them as, but it's because it happens so much around Hero and Claudio. You get the feeling you're meant to care.
They're just the backdrop.
Yeah, they're actually meant. It's weird that they're meant to be kind of the backdrop, and Hero and Claudio is meant to be the main drama, but I can't tell you how much I don't care about Hero and Claudio. What happens to her is horrible, and I'm here for her. I'm like, oh, this shouldn't happen to her. But at the same time, I'm like, this romance is so much less satisfying than Benedict and Beatrice. And so in my version, I probably would get rid of, like, Hero, and I would just have Beatrice be like, hey, you should fake your death to make him feel like shit, and then not marry him. Also, I love the idea of just gender bending everyone, because I always love a good gender bend. It would just prove the point that the institution on both sides is, like, really bad, and compet for both sides is, like, horrible. Oh, I want to briefly talk about costuming in the 2019 version as well, because you were saying how much you love the uniformity yet individuality of in the Branagh version. I think that
no, not in the Branagh version. But I was saying, like, I just love that concept in general and everything.
Yeah,
Warrior is a really good show that does that. But,
But in the 2019 version, the soldiers' uniforms, like, are so cool. It's uniform, like, they have this beautiful, like, red coat, but everyone's, like, undershirts are slightly different.
Or they have, like, different accents around their arms.
And I love the detail of that. I think it's also important because these characters are all different people. But can we talk about, like, the best scene? The most comedic scene in this play is absolutely when Beatrice and Benedict are listening to their friends talk about how the other has feelings for them.
Yes.
And again, this is one of those things that, like, I feel like if you do this wrong, you are a completely incompetent storyteller. Like, it has to be funny. Like, they don't realise while they're listening to their friends that their friends are deliberately saying this because they know that they're there. Mm-hmm. But they're trying to hide from their friends because they can hear them talking about them. And they're like, whoa. I love the David Tennant and Catherine Tate version. I think Benedict
it's
listening
very creative.
is so creative and it's so funny. So he gets his hands on some white paint. How does he even? Oh, because there are some guys painting a wall.
Yeah.
And he, like, leans against, like, puts his hand in the paint bucket when he overhears that Beatrice is in love with him, and he's just like, what? And then, like...
And he's going around looking for a place to wipe his hand while also, you know, still listening, and then when he does hear that Beatrice is in love with him, he just, like, strikes his hand on his face and leaves, like, paint everywhere.
Paint everywhere. And then, like, in his monologue afterwards, like, he's still doing it, he's like, she loves me. Why? And then, again, in that one, the Beatrice one is also very creative. She gets hoisted up by the painters, like, in a harness, and is, like, sort of flying above them as they have a very real and not at all fake conversation about Benedict being in love with her. I do remember that in the Joss Whedon version, this is quite funny. The Benedict one is quite funny just because they're actually sitting out in the open, like, on an open, like, yard. There's nothing to hide behind, but Benedict, like, thinks just by, like, laying flat on the grass. I don't remember how they do this scene in the Branagh version. It must have been that funny.
In the Branagh version, it's just, like, the usual hiding behind hedges kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
The main thing to know about Kenneth Branagh Shakespeare adaptations is he just does the most boring shit imaginable. But, you know, occasionally he makes some really very weird interpretations that are quite bad.
In the Central Park version,
I love how Danielle Brooks is, like, hiding amongst the audience.
Yes.
And she gets, like, she takes a woman's seat and that woman sits in her lap.
God, I wish that were me. But she also, like, grabs the playbill and is, like, hiding behind the playbill. And what I love as well is that while they're talking, like, about how Benedict feels about her, like, she's sitting there going, that's right. She's like, It's so good. And also I love, like, Benedict in that one because he's, like, dancing behind the bush as well. And he's so obviously in their line of sight. And it's so obvious that they can see him. What I really love about them is whether it's intentional or not, I don't know, but they're actually laughing at him.
Yeah.
Like, while they're talking. I don't know if that's actually, like, the actor's just breaking character because what he's doing is so funny, or whether or not...
No, I don't know. I think it would also be in character to still... Because you know, when you can obviously see your friend, but also, like...
You've got to pretend like you can't see your friend. Yeah. It's quite funny. Also, the Benedict in the Central Park version, he's so He's a very handsome man.
Grantham Coleman.
Love him. He's also, apparently, he's like a big Shakespearean actor. Like, he does a lot. And his version of Hamlet, I read, like, a really interesting essay that compared, like, not essay, but, like, an interview. They interviewed Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac?
I don't know if they interviewed him. They compared Oscar Isaac, Andrew Scott's Hamlet, and Grantham Coleman's.
And his Hamlet. And it was very interesting what they wrote about his.
So, yeah, ideally, in my ideal version of Much Ado, you know, where Hero was a lesbian. Beatrice is very butch. I would like some explicit representations of bisexuality.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I would love, like maybe a little bit more background of the history between Beatrice Benedict and Don Pedro as well. For instance, if I was making like a mini-series of Much Ado About Nothing, I would have just like a period where Beatrice does date Don Pedro, just for me.
You would. That's your other favourite ship trope, is like the people who met at the wrong time.
Yes.
Yes.
Anything else for your ideal version of Much Ado?
I think David Tennant is a very good Benedict. Of all, and I've seen David Tennant do a lot of Shakespeare, but that's the performance where I'm like, yep, this is your equivalent. This is who you're meant to play. And I just really, I don't know. In my version, if it wasn't gender bent, I would get him to play Benedict, because I just think seeing him play Benedict is like an absolute delight. But yeah, also, same as yours, I would do something a bit more explicit. I also, and this is a strange thing, but I don't know, I think it was back in like 2012, there was a vlog series called The Lizzie Bennet Diaries, and it was essentially Pride and Prejudice, like as a series of vlogs. From Elizabeth,
I do remember this.
From Lizzie's point of view.
I never watched them, but yeah.
Yeah, I watched them. I thought they were fun. They were quite good. And I would love to do something like that. Like, I would love to do, like, the Messina vlogs or something, and it would be, like, all the characters just, like, monologuing and telling what's happening. Because I actually think that's a very fun format to play.
Much Ado shot Fleabag style.
Yes. Yeah. There's also that guy on YouTube who does Hamlet, like, as a vlog series.
Yes.
And he's doing quite well. I forget his name.
We'll link him on Gay Club.
Yeah, we'll link him on Gay Club. I love his, like, channel. It's quite fun. He just uploads, like...
I love his To Die to Sleep.
Yes. He's just
like,
walking around.
Just going around laying on my bed here.
Yep.
To sleep. Might fuck around and... sleep perchance to dream later. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So I would love to do something like that. I know, like, I feel like that trend has passed of, like, doing things as, like, vlogs, but I don't know. I still think it's a fun thing to play with if you do it right. Other than that, I just think that Beatrice and Benedict is a very fun dynamic, but I think a lot of people who try to adapt it just interpret it as two people who, like, hate each other, which is not really what it is. It's more just two people that don't want to get married and don't want to be involved with each other at all, but need to be prompted to realise that they might want that thing if they considered it with each other. I think, when people think that Beatrice and Benedict is a hate-love, which is something that I don't really agree with whenever I've read it, I'm like, these people do not hate each other. Like, they don't. They think each other is ridiculous, but they don't hate each other. And you wonder, like, that probably all started because one of them started, like, making fun of the other. And it was like, oh, you're going to make fun of me, I'll make fun of you. I feel like it's all pretty empty.
Yeah.
It's pretty empty pettiness. Like, they're just sort of...
It's just for clout.
It's just, it's also almost like a habit. Like, like the way they talk about it, like, oh, we've always done it.
Why stop?
Two of my favourite Shakespearean characters and probably my favourite romance in Shakespeare, aside from Ophelia and Hamlet.
You think Ophelia and Hamlet is a...
I mean, you know how you said, like, it's not, like, sometimes you don't think of things as romance, it's just, like, it's an intimacy.
Eventually we will do a Shakespeare episode on Hamlet, and it's gonna be my time.
She's gonna have a lot to say.
Like, I'm obsessed with Hamlet. The thing I'm writing right now is an adaptation of Hamlet.
You have many legally acquired versions of Hamlet. Very many.
I keep a skull in my room. I have, like, a plaster skull in my room. Even if it's not a particularly Hamlet monologue, doing the Lady Macbeth monologue with a skull is amazing. It just feels great.
When I was teaching, I had to help Mark, because the day I was there was actually U10's drama exams, and I had to help Mark because they had to do them on that day, and so I had to help Mark. It was pretty intense to be just called up. You have to come in. I was like, oh no. But one of the things I had to do was a monologue from Macbeth, where Macbeth is going on about how Lady Macbeth died. And one boy set up, like, blocks. You know those grey blocks you have? He set up 3 blocks, and he did his whole monologue where he's looking at the blocks like that is Lady Macbeth lying there dead. Oh. And then when he finished, because I had to hit, like, a little buzzer to let them know that... And he looked up and was like, miss. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, did you get that this was the chick? I was like, oh, I got that. He was like, but did you get it? Like, that she was dead? Like, the chick? And I was like, I did get that the chick was dead. I got that. That's what this monologue is about. But just as a general thing, I never used to like Shakespeare when I was a teenager. I just want to mention this because I feel like it's important. I wasn't born into this world liking Shakespeare. I actually hated Shakespeare for a long time.
I hated studying Shakespeare in high school. High school destroys it.
High school does destroy it. I think it is worth, if you hate Shakespeare because you studied it in high school, if you genuinely don't like the story, that's fine. Like,
yeah.
But if you don't like it because you studied it, there's a good chance that you were just taught it wrong and that no one taught you to like really read it properly,
or no one taught you to have fun with it. No one taught you that you could interpret it in other ways, in queer ways if you wanted to, but also in other ways. Because I feel like, you know, it's much easier to teach a very rigid, straightforward version of a play, you know, at high school level.
First of all, like, a couple of things. Like, number one, if you're reading Shakespeare, don't read to the lines because that's just, it doesn't mean anything. Read to the punctuation like you would with anything else. I feel the need to say this because a lot of people don't actually know to do that. Yeah. And second of all, like, Shakespeare isn't really meant to be read. Like, I know I just gave you a reading tip, but it's not really meant to be read. So if you have to study Shakespeare, I don't know if we have anyone here who's like school age that listens to this podcast, or even if you're studying it at uni. It is way better if you find a way to go and see it. It is so much easier to understand. I'm like, when you're in school, especially if you go to a like lower funded school like I did, you don't get a lot of opportunities to go and see Shakespeare, so it can be very hard to understand it. But, you know, go and find a movie, and you can actually watch a lot of fun, like, amateur, like, productions of Shakespeare on YouTube that, you know, have a decent go and can actually make it quite funny. Yeah,
you can actually find the David Tennant Much Ado version on YouTube, so please check that out. The serotonin.
Oh, it's... Wow.
From that version is...
It's insane.
It's amazing.
You actually feel high after you like finish watching it.
Like, my face hurts from smiling.
It really is. Want to put that out there. I didn't like Shakespeare for a lot of years, like not till I got to university, and I was actually taught how to read it properly, and I'd actually had an opportunity to see Shakespeare, and I actually went, oh, this is why people like it, because it is fun and it is like crazy and it is dramatic. When you're reading it, it can be very hard to see like what everything is all about. And especially, I think that a lot of Shakespeare is very complicated to understand when you're 13, 14, 15.
And the way that, also another reason the way that they teach that is because so much of it actually has to be censored because it's not for people of that age.
One of the things I do when I am teaching Shakespeare is I actually look up like the dirty jokes in a play, and I'll be like, so you guys think this is boring? And they'll be like, yep. And I'll be like, look at this. And you'd be surprised how quickly people will get involved if they know that there's dirty jokes.
Yeah. And then it becomes kind of like a game.
It does. Much Ado About Nothing, I really do think it is one of the most accessible Shakespeare plays. I do think, like, most people, like, if you're learning Shakespeare, this is, like, or want to get into Shakespeare, it's a great place to start, because it is just...
It's very straightforward. There's not a huge amount of reinterpretation that you need. I mean, like, it can be interpreted in many different ways, but it's really can only be understood in one way, I think.
Yeah, because it is actually a very basic rom-com plot. Yeah. A very basic rom-com. Like,
it's the blueprint for the modern rom-com.
Unfortunately, a lot of rom-coms don't use this blueprint, but it is a very basic, very good blueprint. So, yeah, I do think Much Ado About Nothing is very much underappreciated in that way. That it is just a very simply good story. Feel good, quote unquote. I mean, you know, we can debate about the ending, whether or not it actually is a nice ending, but for the most part, with Beatrice and Benedict, it's a very feel-good story. Yeah, I wish there was more for Much Ado. It's my favourite Shakespeare play, but there's honestly not a lot about it, probably because of how straightforward it is. Like, Hamlet has so much, like, in terms of academia, in terms of adaptations.
Yeah, looking up academia for this, like, queer academia for this was unfortunately
and
quite limiting.
Quite limited. But I did actually find in studying there's a lot of people who have done very cool, basically Beatrice and Benedict like are the same gender and basically have like queered the whole thing,
Mhm.
which I really love that, like, so many amateur productions do that.
Yeah.
I feel like it's also, like, Much Ado is the play that you can have the most fun with how you interpret the characters. I always find it quite interesting. I think Beatrice
And
is...
the comedic scenarios. Because there's so much opportunity, not just with them, sneaking around their friends, but also, like, the party scene.
Yes! The party scene when you can tell a version hasn't really thought about it much beyond it just being a party. Like, it's so boring.
Yeah.
The Joss Whedon one is like that. I'm like, yep, that's a party. Like, could be anything. Could be a murder mystery party.
Yes.
Yes. Why has no one done that yet? I'll do it.
Yes.
I'll do it.
You'll do it.
Also, just as a last point, I have a real issue when if someone is, like, charging you, you don't actually have to buy anything Shakespeare. Like, you don't have to go out and buy a Shakespeare book or anything, because Shakespeare has never been copyrighted. It's never, like, you shouldn't need to pay for it. You can access everything online.
Like, as a text.
As a text. Obviously it's different.
Performances are different.
Obviously it's different if you want performances. If you just want to read Much Ado, you don't need to buy it. Google it. It'll be there.
MIT has a whole document for it, actually.
Yep.
That we've been referring off to as we're recording. So
pretty much. Yeah. I could talk about this play all day because I do love it, but
yeah, that's our episode. That's our first Shakesqueer episode.
Yes.
Next episode is going to be the last episode of this volume.
Woo!
Working title for it is Should We Be Sad? And I kind of just want to look at representations of gay sadness in various media and whether we deserve that or not.
It'll be interesting. It'll be a bit of a debate. But if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, do all the things. You can find us on all the socials, on Instagram and Twitter as gayv_club. You can find the links to D and I's personal socials there as well. Feel free to shoot us a direct message or, add us with what you want to see in the future. We're always down to have suggestions chucked at us from great heights.
There have been some good suggestions already.
There have been. Thank you to people who responded to our call out on Twitter for suggestions.
Yeah, so we're already planning some of them for the next volume.
Yep. So
which I'm very excited about.
Thank you to those tweeterers. Yes, and as per usual, be safe. Watch something nice. Bye.
Bye.